All right, guys. So just a quick introduction about me. Obviously, I know you guys all, but you guys don't really know about me and my background. Born and raised in the Bay Area, I'm a certified athletic trainer, which means that I went to school for athletic training, got a degree, and then took a test. Now I get to call myself that. What that means is basically I'm a healthcare professional specialized in everything injuries. So prevention, initial diagnosis, treatment of the injuries, and rehab. And my influence into the weight room has come over the last 3 or 4 years. I was at a high school for a while just helping athletes in the athletic training room, so anybody gets hurt, they come see me. I help them get back to their sport and get back into the weight room with the weight room professionals. At a physical therapy clinic I was at for about 1.5 years, I was running the sports performance program there. That's basically right before I moved here to LA. And that was basically taking clients who were PT patients, and then they would get their 4 to 6 visits, whatever insurance gave them, and then they would give them to me basically, and I would finish their rehab, whether it's somebody who's coming off a knee replacement, hip replacement, someone older, or youth athlete, ACL tear, return to play, rotator cuff, return to play, that type of stuff. So that's more of where my background is in the injuries and in that realm of things, but I've really been diving deep into biomechanics over the last couple of years, so that's kind of the stuff that I want to talk about with you guys today, because I think that'll be the stuff where you guys can make like the biggest impact and really will translate into what you guys do with your clients. So that's what I'm hoping to get for you guys today, is just like as much usable information as you can, some new ways of thinking about stuff, maybe things that you can start to implement with your clients, because they're kind of all of our clients, which, better for them and better for all of us. Yeah, it's high intensity, obviously, and like you guys both said, injuries, right? For half the people probably that think of CrossFit that have never done it before, they're thinking, oh, that's a good way to get injured. You know what I mean? So we want to be all on a united front of how can we get the most out of what we're doing in here so that people feel really good when they leave. You know what I mean? That they're making gains. We know we can do that because I've seen you guys all do that individually really, really well, make gains. But then also that they're not having to see me, right? Okay. So first thing I want to talk about in terms of the squat today is just like, what is it, right? Does anybody want to take a gander at what they want to describe a squat to be? There's no right or wrong answer, really. I like it. Yeah, I would say yes to all those things. For sure, dropping that booty down is exactly right? A squat is going to be more of a vertical descent of this guy right here, okay? So dropping this down in space vertical, which means that the knees will definitely be going forward, which means that we will definitely be transferring more weight to the lower extremity, right? So you guys kind of hit the nail on the head there. There's obviously no one right way to do it, right? There's a million different ways to squat. We'll talk about a lot of them today, whether it's a sumo squat, whether it's a narrow squat. We'll talk about all the practical applications in terms of where we might want to put the load and why. Whether we want to go split stance, single leg, all those things, right? We do such a great variety in here. And that's why I like coming here, because I think we do a really good job of giving people different looks and different feels of what they could get out of their body. But just having that next level kind of understanding of when we're doing what we're doing and why we might want to do it, especially as it pertains to our one-on-one clients, right? In the class setting, it's going to be more, let's just get everybody moving different ways. Movement variability is going to be great for them. So that, like we said, just dropping that thing down, man. That's pretty much what it is. So we'll talk about a lot of different things in terms of biomechanical principles, okay? This will be more of me talking, but I'm going to try to keep it short and sweet. In terms of movement options, we really have two. No matter what we do, we have compression and we have expansion. This is one way of thinking about how we move. So compression is going to be more internal rotation, extension, adduction, right? So those movements tend to couple together in what we call compression. That's going to be our compressive forces. So if we're coming up from a squat, let's say, right, and we're putting force into the ground, we have to put internal rotation force if we want to do anything. So just me standing up right now, I have some sort of relative amount of internal rotation that's driving through my pelvis, through my femurs, through my tibias, down into the ground. Otherwise, I cannot stand, right? When you go down into a squat, you need obviously more of that. Like we talked about, the load gets greater. You need more internal rotation to get you back up, okay? So that's gonna be our compression. Expansion is everything on the opposite, right? External rotation, flexion, abduction, okay? That's gonna be more of our eccentric stuff. That's gonna be more of our inhalation, right? When we're taking a breath in, that's gonna be more expansive, right? As you can see through the rib cage, when you take a breath in, right, your diaphragm's gonna expand, your ribs are gonna get bigger, so on and so forth, okay? So we'll talk about that more, but that's kind of the lens at which I look through a lot of the squat stuff, especially when we talk about people, right? Some people have a really tough time getting force, right? You probably have clients where you're like, it's really hard for them to go up in weight, and just a little bit of weight makes them really, really tough. They're just not great at finding compression through the lower legs, basically. And then some will be more compressed, where they're really tight, and that's the people where you're like, ah, man, I got to work mobility with these people, right? So understanding who that might be and how that relates to the squat, we'll talk more about that. Second one here is the limb arc model. Have you guys heard of that? Has anybody heard of that? No, that's a new thing? Okay, not quite. That's gonna be more of like, this is gonna be more of like from a limb, so think shoulder and hip mostly is where you're gonna see this, right? Especially with the shoulder, it's a little bit easier to kind of break that down because we'll have basically, hopefully 180 degrees of motion in a shoulder range of motion, right? So 0 to 60, so let's say that's my shoulder at rest, and then as I come up here, that's going to be more expansive in nature, okay? So that's going to be mostly external rotation happening at the shoulder and relative flexion. This is all relative stuff, so in regards to each other and the rib cage and all that. Once we get through 60 to basically 120 is going to be more compressive, so more internal rotation, which is why, like, let's say we're taking a bench press, right? That's highly internally rotated in nature. When you have a bench and you have your hands here, you're pronated, right? That's all internal rotation. And that's at 90, obviously, right? And then anything above is gonna be, obviously 120 to 180, that's gonna go back to external rotation, all right? We're gonna have a movement through the joint, okay? Same thing happens at the hip, but obviously the range of motions are a little bit different, right? So if I'm squatting and I'm starting standing like that, I'm at 0, right? As I come down a little bit, like that, that's actually even too much. Say like that, the first 60 degrees are gonna be more expansive in nature, okay? More external rotation happening, more flexion happening. This is mostly, we're talking at the hips and the pelvis. So when I say that, that's gonna be here, and the sacrum here is a really big part of this, okay? So the sacrum has two movements. It can, well, two main movements in the sagittal plane. It can nutate, which means it can push forward like that, right? If you're looking at me from the side, or it can counternutate, which means basically roll back. So that's gonna be, the counternutation is gonna be your expansion. So when we start a squat, we're gonna have a relative amount of counternutation of that sacrum, which is gonna be a little more lumbar flexion, right? When I get to about past 60 degrees of my squat, so as I'm getting towards a 90-degree hip angle here, that's when things are gonna change. So 60 to about 100, things are gonna change. That's when this is gonna relatively start to come forward. There's not this much motion actually happening at the pelvis, right? This is very flimsy, and I made it that way just for the sake of demonstrating these concepts to you guys. But as that comes forward a little bit, right, this is a small movement, but that's gonna change. So as we know as well, like once we pass 90, right, a lot of things change in terms of the groin will change its moment arm. So that becomes more of an external rotator, right? Like in the deep squat, when you're driving those knees out and you can really feel your groin working, it's actually changed its lever arm so it can actually help you externally rotate at that point in the squat, right? Or drive your knees out, which is actually gonna be internal rotation. And also piriformis, right? We go below 90, that goes from an external rotator of the femur to an internal rotator of the femur, right? So these things are changing as we're going into different movements with our pelvis, with our femurs, all that, right? So 0 to 60 is gonna be our expansion. 60 to about 100 degrees, so once I get to about parallel is gonna be compression, right? And then once I get below that, I'm gonna basically re-counternutate if I can do this properly, this is if you can do it properly, you're going to get that recounternutation and basically flexion through the spine a little bit more as opposed to the extension of the lumbar spine, and you're going to get all of those expansion mechanics again, right? So there's kind of like a give and take here that happens, right? Things are changing. So that's important as we get into the practical stuff. That'll kind of set the stage for why some stuff happens, right? Because, and Pete and I have talked about this before, but valgus probably has gotten a little too much hate, right? Or a little too much maybe misunderstanding from our community as a whole. And when we say valgus, right, like it's sometimes different from internal rotation, right? Like there is valgus in the sense of like, yeah, your knees are totally collapsing and you have no control. And then you look at some of the best jumpers, some of the best sprinters, some of the best power lifters, and you watch them try to get out of a squat and they're all there. You know what I mean? Their knees completely dive in and they are forcing internal rotation to the ground. Same thing with jumpers. You see like a lot of people, especially at the NFL Combine, when they go to do the long jump and you see their knees just drive in, right? And it's like, okay, well, if you're going to tell me that the strongest power lifter out there has a weak glute med, I'm calling BS. You know what I mean? Like you can tell, and then he'll be better. Like, right, exactly. And that's a concept of right. That's that internal rotation. You got to put force into the ground. The better you can do that, the better you're going to get back up, right? Or the more explosive you're going to be going up. So I'm not saying that everyone should dive their knees into the ground, but there should be movement there, right? We want to have that movement there, especially in relation to the squat, right? When we come down and we're going forward, like we talked about, those knees got to go forward. If the knees are coming forward, my shins are going this way, I'm dorsiflexing, my ankles have to pronate as well. My feet have to pronate. So the knees are going to come in a little bit, right? So the whole like, driving the knees out thing can be helpful if, yes, there's a true valgus, if the person you're just like, oh my God, like you watch them do a single leg squat and it's like this, and they literally can't hold it, then yeah, that's probably somebody that you'd want to throw a band around them for a little while. You don't necessarily need them here on the band, right? But you'd have the band just here as a little bit of feedback, but you'd still want their knees tracking pretty straight over the big toe, right? But just like we worked on with this, whereas that foot came forward, we felt everything turn in, naturally that's what's going to happen at the knee. So it's okay if that's happening a little bit, if you guys see that. We don't have to cue them to go outside the fifth toe, right? The knee's coming forward, the shin's moving forward, there's going to be dorsiflexion, which means there's going to be pronation, right? And in my mind, the further you go forward, the more you're going to have to let that knee travel across. It's going to be more like a J motion, right? So that's just something to think about, right? I think we've gone way too far with the whole must protect valgus at all costs. Now, in here, we're working with a lot of people, especially in groups. You can throw a band on them, that's fine. You can say, hey, because there's so many of them in here, you know, and we're trying to get them to be as safe as possible. So yes, if somebody like does have a terrible valgus and then we have them doing some single leg this or that or whatever, like sure, I'm okay with that, but just for you guys, you know, and for us to all have that open conversation about, you know, we don't want to restrict movement, right? We want to let the natural movement of the body happen and we want to embrace that. And if we see that it's out of the natural move where they're really, you know, then that's when we can make it just like any other thing where you say like, okay, let's change that. All right, gait cycle and shin angle. Are we like familiar with the phases of gait? Does anyone want to take a crack at that one? Exactly, yes. So it'll be early stance, mid stance, late stance. You can call it heel strike, mid stance, toe off. Some people will break it into even more phases of like early mid stance, late mid stance. You don't really need to do all that. The good news is all of this kind of connects with the compression expansion, right? All of it goes together. So from the gait cycle, let's say, we'll call it heel strike for now, right? First phase is going to be heel strike. That's when you're walking forward, your heel hits the ground, right? My shin, as you can see here, is at what we would call a negative angle. So my knee is behind my ankle, right? That's going to be more expansive in nature, okay? That's happening at the pelvis. So this is going to be more counternutated sacrum, more externally rotated innominate bone here, okay? Then I come into mid stance because my weight's over me, like we talked about, I have to have that internal rotation. I'm fighting the force of ground, right? Ground reaction force. That's when everything goes into compression. So my whole thigh and my shin and my ankle are going to internally rotate pronate, right? I have to do that because I'm fighting the ground reaction forces now. Okay, and then we have toe off or late stance, which is when I'm coming over and I'm basically externally rotating, right? And I say externally rotating, it's all of them together, right? But I'm resupinating the foot and I'm externally rotating. So you can even see as I pull my pant leg up here, and you guys can practice this yourself, and I'll actually have you guys just stand up with me in just a second and we'll do this together. But you can see as you kind of move through like a gait cycle here, how everything wants to basically turn in, right, as I go through mid stance here. And then as you go to push off, think about like a jump, right? You're going to come down here, you're going to basically put force into the ground, push through your big toe, right? And then as you jump at the very end, you're going to get that resupination. If you think about like a calf raise, right? We want to get that little bit of heel kind of inversion at the end there, right? Because when we're exploding, that's what's going to happen. So even in jumping and squatting, all that, you'll see these same themes, right? Let's go ahead and just stand up real quick. I want to get you guys moving. I don't want you sitting down too long. And just take one foot, and let's just all do our right foot, and let's just go through a kind of a full pattern of like toe to heel and then just coming back. So you'll just basically do a little ankle rocker on the right side. And I want you guys to feel how your shin is kind of moving and your femur's kind of moving, and feel what happens at the ankle as well, right? Whereas that heel hits, your arch is nice and high, and then as your foot comes to the ground and you get over your foot, right, you'll feel more weight going into the inner portion of your foot, right, the medial aspect. And then as we push away, we don't want to keep that heel basically everted. We don't want to keep the foot totally pronated, right? It's going to resupinate to drive us away. So the gait cycle is a really great way to kind of demonstrate those same concepts, and it's going to be a big kind of consideration when we get into some of our exercises, right? Let's say I'm doing a lunge, right? And I'm biasing this front leg. Which phase of gait would this be here? If we're talking about my left leg here. Mid, exactly, right? Because I'm at a neutral shin angle, right? If I'm doing, let's say I'm doing a rear foot elevated, right? Still talking about the left leg here. So let's say I have the foot even higher. What would this be? Late, right? You guys see how now I have a positive shin angle, right? So it's just like when I was doing gait here, and at toe off, the same shin angle here, right? Where the shin is now moved forward over the foot, over the toes. So now I'm more biasing that toe off, that late stance, right? So if you wanted it, let's say you had an athlete, for practical conversation's sake, and you wanted to get them to be a more effective jumper, right? More explosive. You might want to get them into that toe off position, that rear foot elevated split squat, because they're going to have to really work on driving with that knee forward, right? It's going to be a little bit, it's going to add some compression into that, okay? So those are just some ways that you can think about how that shin angle, you know, if you had a really wide split squat or something like that, or you were doing like a driving forward split squat, how you would work different phases of gait, and that's also going to dictate kind of what we get from the exercises that we choose, okay? Back to the foot pressures, one thing that I really like to do, and I'll have you guys stand up again for this one, but when we load, right, when we're coming down, that's going to be more the eccentric phase, right? Tendons, where we're yielding to gravity, right? We're letting gravity win on the way down. That's going to be more expansive in nature, okay? Because again, compression, putting force in the ground, getting back up, okay? Overcoming that force. So what I like to say is on the way down, 60-40 heels, right? You can say the same stuff, right? Tripod foot, very important. You want to grab the, you want to be, you want to have some intent through your feet for sure. We don't want them being passive down there, right? Because that's our ticket to the ground. That's our ticket to beating the ground, basically, right? So on the way down, I say 60-40 heels. And then on the way up, I say 60-40 toes, okay? I'm not lifting the heel, but again, I want to push the big toe into the ground, because what that's going to do is that's going to make sure my knees stay forward. So what I want you guys to do is I want you guys to load in through your heels, and then I want you to push up through your heels. And I want you to notice what you feel, and just do a couple of reps there. It's going to be more hingy quads, and what's happening is it's going to be a driving back of those knees. When we go through the heel, that's that heel strike, and that shin is going to want to drive towards a negative shin angle. For a lot of people, this is going to be bad because, especially with load, right? If we get them here and their knees start to lock out and their spine's in this position for 9 out of the 10 people that come in here, bad news, right? And then what I want you guys to try next is 60-40 heels and then really push through the toes. Okay, and tell me what you feel differently this time around. Right. Everything's kind of coming up at once, right? What I feel is the peach. Yeah. You guys feel that a little bit? Yeah. Do a couple more of those and see if you can feel your glutes kind of driving you forward. Yeah, when I say the toes, I mean mostly the big toe ball, okay? That's going to be our prime kind of propulsive thing. Yeah, exactly. Well said. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? And you did that, right? Knees come back, then we're more hingy, which is not the end of the world, but in this sense, especially when we're loading people, let's get them pushing through that big toe. Let's get them getting that internal rotation. They're going to get more here too, a little more groin, a little more hammy, and glute, right? Like we talked about, internal rotation, extension, right? So glutes are our extenders of the hip, right? Internal rotators of the hip are going to be medial hamstrings, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, and then the groin, okay? So you're going to get a lot more of that, and like Pete said, they're going to come up more balanced, more here with their knees forward, right? They're not going to be doing that, right? And I'm obviously exaggerating for dramatic effect, but the more we can get people to not use their back, that's going to be a huge win for this gym in particular, right? If we can get less and less people coming in here with back pain and leaving here with back pain, that's going to be huge for us, you know what I mean? Assessment stuff. I'm going to keep it pretty brief. What I'm looking for, typically when I have someone do a squat, James, you want to be my? Sure. Yeah. What I'm looking for here, why don't you stand right here, is I want to get their feet pretty much hip width, right? When we tell most people, hey, like, do a squat, they're going to all day long, right? When they do that, none of that relative motion stuff happens. When they go super wide feet, it doesn't really happen, right? It allows their pelvis to just drop straight to the ground. So they're not getting internal rotation with that, right? So what I like to do is I like to have them feet where James has his. That way we're actually seeing what he's got, what the pelvis has, okay? So usually what I'd like to do is to take your shoes off and socks if you're comfortable with that. Because the feet are going to tell us a lot, all right? And then I also have him go arms straight out towards these guys, yeah. And what that's going to do is, number one, as he goes to squat, that's going to tell me if he's rotating at all, right? If I see one hand kind of reach out to me more, number one. And then number two, what I'll do is, go ahead and turn around and face the, I'm looking at the wrinkles on his shirt, okay? Okay. I'm looking to see where is he compressing, right? Where I see the wrinkles is where I see compression, right? So he's got some compression through here, I would say. Not terrible, and you guys see a pretty major dip right here, right? He's living in some lumbar hyperextension, I would say, right? All right, let's go ahead and have you flip back around. And then I just have him do a squat. So I don't try to cue him too much into it. I'm not trying to like have them do it my way. I just want to see what does their body do, right? So I just have them go pretty slow though. So just give us a little squat, go pretty slow. Good. Keep going. Have them do a few. Pause there. Which hand is closer to you, Jesse? I would say his right, actually. Yeah. Here, see from the side, maybe. And then look at his knees. Don't move. Don't move. Look at his knees.
So he's rotating.
He's like going this way, right? Good. Come on up. So they're gonna fire to feel like they're pulling him more forward, right? So if you see that, that's he's probably falling back a little bit too much. Maybe it's he needs a little more dorsiflexion. Maybe it's he needs to allow those knees to translate forward a little bit more. And you can tell he's holding that supinated foot, right? Especially on the left side, his ankle like doesn't move at all. So we want a little bit of play when we're squatting, okay? We want those arches to drop to the ground a little bit as he gets towards that sticking point, right? And when he gets to the bottom, they'll resupinate a little bit, right? Like we talked about. ER extension, IR pronation, ER extension. Right. That's a great question. Typically, when you see somebody rotating one side or the other, whichever side they're rotating towards, they're going to have a little bit more range of motion in that hip. Yeah, but he's falling into the right.
Right.
He's kind of, so I would say that his right hip probably has more range of motion than his left. So let's see a couple more. See the shift? Mm-hmm. So stop at the bottom for us, James. And then can you guys see that? Look at his center, where it is in relation to his knees. Can you see that? What do you guys see?
This way.
And that's very common too because he's pushing away from the left side into the right, right? Heel's gonna be the loading. He's propulsing through the midfoot, through his big toe, from the left to the right. And you can see the center of his shorts is closer to his right knee, which tells me that this right hip is gonna have better hip flexion than the left. He's going to have more range of motion. Left is probably tighter in hip flexion, right? Which might be this stuff back here, you know, at this range. And so, yeah, can you guys kind of see, just starting to get a picture here, right? So it's just something that you want to be aware of because if you go to say like, okay, looks pretty good, let's throw a bar on you, and then it's like, we're just going to groove the patterns that he's already grooved, but just harder and harder, more and more and more, right? So what you might want to do is try to get him a little bit more hip flexion. What are some ways that we can give people more hip flexion? So I would get him somewhere like here, and then I would, you know, grab something like this, right? Because how can we get groin? Squeeze. So I'm going to put that right there. And what I'm going to have him do is I'm going to have him dorsiflex a little bit, right? Because we're trying to get more dorsiflexion. I'm going to have him squeeze the brick a little bit. You doesn't have to crush it, right? You just have to get these guys going. Can you feel your groin a little bit? Yeah. Perfect. And then what I'm going to have him do is I'm going to have him take his hands right below his glutes and see if he can find kind of where his sit bone's at. Okay? Exactly. So what I'll have him do is I'm going to have him just barely lift his hips off the ground, like try to scoop his hips, like a little bit of posterior tilt, about an inch. Exactly, because I want the hamstrings to do that. So when you get a lot of people to tuck, they're just gonna crunch from here and we don't necessarily want the tuck happening from there because that's not super sustainable for them to hold ab contraction all day long, right? But if we can get him to, and can you feel your hamstrings kick on when you do that? Yeah. So you'll feel, and you guys can try this too, I'll have you guys all try this, but you can feel the hamstrings kick on underneath your fingers, right? Yeah. Exactly. So just have them hold it and then have them breathe. Take a big belly breath, you know, because it's really hard if you're like holding here to take a belly breath. It's just not going to happen. Medial hamstrings, yeah. So you have two that come down the medial side, and you have one that comes on the lateral side, basically, right? So we're mostly going medial here because we're trying to get internal rotation. Yeah. So he can feel, and you'll feel it down here too. So what you're trying to cue him into is little tuck. He's barely off the ground here, okay? You don't want them like scooping super hard. That's not the point. We just want to get this fired up. But what I'm going to tell him is think about this little box chair thing that we're on right here. Imagine it's got wheels, okay? And I want you to think about sliding it towards you. Yeah, exactly, while you hold that tuck. So now he's squeezing here. Now he's actively knee flexing, so he's feeling this a lot more, right? His distal hamstrings, lower down, and then he's also feeling the proximal hamstrings by that sit bone that we talked about, right? So you get him going on something like this, and then you get him going back into the squat or whatever you're doing is going to help him understand how to find those internal rotation muscles and mechanics. And now what he's doing there is he's creating kind of this at the innominate. So he's getting that motion that he needs to get back, basically, right? So that's one way to do internal rotation. Just to keep it simple, this is one way that I like to do it because it's pretty simple and it's pretty effective. And if he's like really, really good at this, what you could have him do is you can have him try to get both at the same time. So let's say James, right, we know that he needs more expansion on the left hip, but he needed probably a little bit more compression on the right, right? That way, because he was compressing on his left, pushing himself to the right. So we're gonna flip it for him. So what I'll have him do is do this on the right side, right? This right side's gonna stay down because we're gonna have him compress on the right. And then I'm gonna have him take this off and then tuck up for me. And then still pull that, yeah, there you go. And then bring this towards your chest. Good. Right? And I want you to just breathe here, okay? And then with every breath, you're gonna try to get that left knee a little closer to your chest. And keep your knee like squeezing in a little bit here. So it doesn't have to be like all the way in, but just keep it here and like imagine that I'm pushing out here, right? So you can still feel your groin on, hamstring. So his right side's now being the propulsive side, the internally rotated, compressed side. And now his left, we're up here now. Exactly, that's this position here, right? That's gonna be the expansive, right? So just like you said, James, where we're trying to get maybe stretch the glute, what's happening to his glute on the left side here? This stretching, right? We're taking a hip extensor and we're a deep hip flexion here. So he doesn't even really need to like feel a deep stretch. He might not be like, oh my God, it burnt. You know, it's not gonna be like, it's so tight. I don't know, how'd that feel to you?
Burning.
Burning on the right side probably, right? Yeah, it's a lot of work, especially when you take one off. So if someone's like athletic, you know what I mean? And they don't wanna be like, dude, what am I doing sitting here breathing? You know, that's somewhere that you could torch him pretty good, right? But it's gotta have the tuck, it's gotta have the pulling back towards him, okay? And now you're getting that. That's getting a little fancy, right? That's because we were talking about the hypotheticals of one side versus the other. And I wanted you to show you guys how I would maybe, you know, tailor that towards him. But you could also do that in a split squat. So let's talk about some of the practical applications. So like a split squat, right? We have 1 foot forward, 1 foot back. We're typically gonna get more internal rotation on the back leg, more external rotation on the front leg, right? But it also depends on what angle I'm at. So if I'm on the ground here, I'm, you know, pretty mid stance, right? If I go front foot elevated, and let's say I'm here, right? I would say I'm almost more like heel strike here. Heel strike, maybe mid stance, right? But I'm in such deep hip flexion here, right? I'm dropping so deep into this front side that I'm gonna get back probably some of that expansion. So another great one for James to work on would be left leg elevated, you know, front foot elevated split squat. Right, yeah, and you guys know how to do that too. You could try a foam roller. You can have them do like a crossover. You can have them do whatever dynamic mobility you guys want to do before. You know what I mean? I would say so. And the, right? And he's telling you the ankle, so you gotta respect that and be like, all right, we're gonna work that ankle. So maybe you work the posterior side a little bit. If it's just have him do like a foam roller on the on his calf, right? Or if you guys have another tool you like to do for that, or another, you know. But then you can have him do like an active dorsiflexion thing too, like a tibialis raise, right? Where you have him park his hips here, just to James's point of like stretching the stuff on the back, right? And then strengthening the stuff on the front and have him pick up more dorsiflexion actively, especially after you do a stretch. It's good to strengthen the antagonist, right? Because then you just created this new range of motion here. And if you're not going to actively use that, and you will if you're in a squat, right? But if you're just going to do that and be like, all right, cool, let's go do bench press, then you're kind of leaving some gains out on the table, you know what I mean? Because you want to strengthen within the new range you've created. And if they don't get that, you don't have to like stop everything that you're doing to get that, right? What's another way that you could bypass that if you wanted to start getting somebody going on a squat? Because you guys, you don't have as much time to lose, you know what I mean? Like you don't have time to waste. These people are coming to you, they want results pretty quickly, they want to feel like they're getting stronger, you know, gaining weight, losing weight, whatever it is, right? So what's a way that we could just bypass the ankles entirely? Choose wedge, right? Why does that bypass the ankle? What happens there, right? You just, instead of starting at 0, you're starting at, we'll say, -10. So then that first descent, by the time you get down to, here, instead of being at 10 degrees dorsiflexion, you're just at neutral ankle, right? Which means I can get my 10 degrees that I have, and now I can get down to here, right? So you can do both, right? You can have them, work on some dorsiflexion stuff, right? And then you can put a wedge on them and have them get their gains, but not, and then over time transition them into, a squat that they can have their feet on the ground.
So I've always wondered, how much of a difference all the ankle mobility drills and stretches actually make, because I've had a lot of people, even myself and other friends, where it's they've been doing that shit for years, and it's the same, all right, you look the same.
Yeah. And what I would say is that comes back to this. They don't have any of that. So you can do all the ankle stuff in the world that you want to do. You can get 25 degrees of dorsiflexion, and this isn't going to change, right? So that's a big part of it, is you got to address that, but you also got to address this, right? Comes back to that, right? Compressive athletes, sprinters, they're going forward, right? They're just going to live here, right? They're going to live tight, because when they hit the ground, they got to be stiff, right? They don't have the loading, the temp, you know what I mean? It's stiff. So to your point, yeah. And I have a friend who's the same way. He walked like this, basically with his heels off the ground our whole life, and he played sports and all that kind of stuff. And of course, now he's paying the price for it. But, the ankle stuff's going to help, but it's not going to get you all the way there, to your point, right? That's when this stuff comes into play. So if we want to get more dorsiflexion, right, especially as we get down towards here, right, 90, we need more internal rotation pronation, right, because that's where we're going to get here. So for the average person, right, most people don't have great dorsiflexion, right? You don't even really need to test it. You'll just see, and you can ask them to, right, are you getting any tightness in the ankles, whatever, or they'll tell you that. But most people don't have great dorsiflexion. A wedge is going to be a great place to start, right? And if they're having trouble, they're leaning forward a lot or they're butt winking really early, the wedge is going to be a great place to start them out too, just to get them to understand, okay, let's get the knees forward. Right, yeah. We got to keep them happy. We got to keep them engaged.
Keep them confident.
Exactly. Exactly. You don't want to strip them of all their stuff and be like, all right, well, until you can do it this way, I'm not going to put it, you know what I mean? That's your job in here, is to get them, strong and feeling good. So it's I think you got to have a good balance of that. Use it as a mobility thing at the beginning, right? All right, I'm going to get you to squat narrow, whatever. Or put it just as a warm up. I'm going to do 2 sets with the goblet and the heels elevated, and really get those knees moving over your toes a little bit, and allow that. We're working on the foot pressure. All right, cool. You're feeling good. Okay, let's get the bar. We'll do a practice set with the bar, whatever, and then, we'll load on from that in whatever way that they feel most comfortable, right? You don't want to take anything away from them. Still build them up, still let them do what they want to do, but just be thinking about how can I make them move a little bit better, right? Because if we just hammer on strength to somebody who wants to be here all day, they're just going to get stronger here. You know what I mean? So it's we can have them do both and eventually get them to be a little bit better movers, So somebody who's in terms of front loading versus back loading, right? If it's somebody who's kind of falling forward as they squat, right? You're not going to probably want to backload that person, because what's going to happen when you put the weight on their back? Where's their body going to go? It's going to go more forward, right? So if you want to teach somebody to not go here when they squat, but have them stay a little bit more upright, that's when you want to choose something that's a little more front loaded. Right, so that's when you'd maybe want to go with a goblet. Doesn't even have to be a heavy one. It's not necessarily that you're trying to load them through the roof, but give them a little something to put weight that way, so that their body feels more comfortable. Instead of being here, they can be more here. Just let them come back in space with the pelvis and the rest of their body. You know what I mean? That's why for a lot of people, the wedge and a goblet is going to be a great way to get them started, or a wedge in the suspension. Like you said, from a nervous system perspective, just get them comfortable with that position. But that front load for most people is what they're going to need to get pushed back. For someone like me, let's say, right, if we're going down the narrow path and I have a tough time putting force into the ground, I might need more of a back load, right? Because that's going to push me forward, which is going to get my knees forward, which is going to give me that pronation. And then if I really wanted to work internal rotation, right, that's that person that you'd want to backload them versus front load. Some of it is through the positions that I'm in terms of like, this is stuff that I didn't really get into today, but the orientation of my tibias, as you guys can see, I'm like kind of like bow-legged and very externally rotated through that. And like we talked about, right, as I get into mid-stance, what's my tibia going to do? It's going to internally rotate, right? My tibias are not internally rotated, far from it, right? And because of my femur position too, I can tell where I'm at, but also I can just feel that I'm usually in my heels. You know what I mean? Like just ask people too, like, hey, where do you feel the weight when you're standing? You know, right? So you might be someone where, all right, well, we're not going to backload you, right? We could, but you're already in your toes, and now you're just pushing more weight forward. So for you, a front, you know, a zercher, right? Even a safety bar would be kind of like middle ground maybe, right? Because you're backloaded, but the arms are in front, so you have that. But I would say, you know, like a zercher or a front squat for you, and just get you to find your heels, bring you back, right? We're always just trying to give people what they don't have. You know what I mean? Try to find out what's missing and try to help them with that.
I think so. Like if someone is having a hard time expanding, what stance would be better for them in that sense?
I would put them. Do you mean like in terms of foot position and all that kind of stuff, or just everything? That's a great question. I mean, the wider stance would be better if you're trying to get them to squat and get them to push weight and they don't have it yet, you know, going narrow feet. Like, I'm not saying you do one or the other. You'd probably have them go narrow too, but maybe just not load it, you know what I mean, a ton. That's going to allow them to just drop more and get more full range of motion. When they go wider, they're going to get more groin. They're going to get more lateral hip, right? But they're not going to get as much like glute max, not as much quad, not as much hamstring, you know, because you're just working the more oblique angled muscles, basically. So just a couple of these other things, right? Heels elevated versus toes elevated, right? What's heels elevated going to do? We kind of talked about this already, right, with the wedge. But it's going to help them find their heel a little bit more, right? Well, they're going to be through their heels, but it's going to give them that plantar flexion. It's going to allow them to bypass the ankle, get the knees forward, drop a little bit more vertically, right? The toes elevated is going to do the opposite, right? It's going to push them back a little bit. Yeah, you can flip the wedge, or you can just have them do like a small plate and do it like that. But if they're having, especially like, let's say like a hinge too, right? A deadlift. Yeah, for some people, especially if they're having a really tough time or there's too much force in their knees, right? Because your knee's going to take on a little bit more force when the heels are elevated. And maybe if that's just too much for them, just elevate the toes, and that'll just have them turn into what Jesse would call more of like a squinge, right? But it'll take a little bit of force off their knees and allow them to understand the squat and get still the quad and the glute that you want without. Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to give them more compression too, you know, because it's going to put them in that more dorsiflexion, whereas the opposite with the heels elevated where they're here, and that's going to, like we said, drop them down, be more expansive, more vertical. If you go here, that's going to give them a little bit more IR, you know what I mean, a little bit more internal rotation, a little more force, more hamstrings, that kind of stuff, right? Most people you find, especially in here, will be one or the other. They'll be the athlete, right? Thanks, guys. They'll be the former athlete who's like, let's go, you know, who's just like ready to go at any moment. Or they'll be, you know, really, really tight, the old person you get that can't, you know, those are the type of people that, all right, well, have them find their heels a little bit, right? Have them get down and drop that thing down, right? Slow versus fast, same thing, right? Slow is going to be eccentric, expansive, right? So that person that's really tight or whatever, you know, you might want to have them fast, like moving really fast, right? So for me, I might want that. I probably want that because I need to learn how to put force into the ground, right? James, probably more of a slower one, right? Have him do it in the front, have him go slow, right? Me, maybe backload me, have me go fast, something like that. It depends on what your goal is. Are you trying to fix them or are you just trying to slam weight on, you know? You can do both. You know, and that's what Jesse's saying, right? Like, just work on getting that range of motion just by having them squat. You don't even have to do any of this stuff, right? I'm just trying to get you guys thinking about kind of my lens about how I look at it and how you can think about when this weird stuff comes up where someone is doing that stuff, how to make some sense of it and what it might mean, right? But at the end of the day, right, like just get them doing it the right way, get them moving it, and then, you know, you don't have to load it right away. Load the patterns that they're comfortable in, get them strong, and then give them the little, I always say, like with my clients, I give them a little bit of what they want and a little bit of what they need. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times people don't like to do the stuff that they need. But you want to keep them happy. Right, yeah. And you know, we got to keep them happy, we got to keep them engaged.
Keep them confident.
Exactly. Exactly. You don't want to strip them of all their stuff and be like, all right, well, until you can do it this way, like I'm not going to put it, you know what I mean? Like, that's your job in here is to get them, you know, strong and feeling good. So it's like, I think you got to have a good balance of that. Use it as like a mobility thing at the beginning, right? All right, I'm going to get you to squat narrow, whatever. Or put it just as a warm up. You know, I'm going to do 2 sets with the goblet and the heels elevated and really get those knees moving over your toes a little bit and allow that. We're working on the foot pressure. All right, cool. You're feeling good. Okay, you know, let's get the bar. We'll do a practice set with the bar, whatever, and then, you know, we'll load on from that in whatever way that they feel most comfortable, right? You don't want to take anything away from them. Still build them up, still let them do what they want to do, but just be thinking about how can I make them move a little bit better, right? Because if we just hammer on strength to somebody who wants to be here all day, they're just going to get stronger here. You know what I mean? So it's like we can have them do both and eventually get them to be a little bit better movers, you know? And the split stance stuff is great. Like as much as you guys can get some of that in, you know, whether it's regular split squat, rear foot elevated, front foot elevated. I love that stuff, and that stuff is really good for them because it allows like that to happen and that to happen, which makes them better movers, movement variability, right? If they're always here and then we have them squat wide, they can stay here and do this, right? Then they never get that, and they don't get that, and they don't get that, right? That's why I was saying earlier, the classes in here, it's great because we have the movement variability. So they might be doing a side shuffle, rotate, slam, side shuffle, rotate, slam into, you know, a heels elevated goblet squat or just a goblet squat or whatever, right? Into an alternating lunge, right? And you get some of this stuff, so that's good. You want to make sure that in your programs, you know, you're doing the split stance stuff. The single leg stuff is really great too. But everything changes because then you get rotation in the mix, right? So then there's there's hip shifting too, of turning your pelvis towards the knee we're working. So we kind of want to do that when we're doing the split stance stuff too. But that's a great way to load it, and it's a great way to give them some motion here. So just make sure if you're doing squat stuff with people, which you guys all are, like you're not just doing the double leg stuff, but get them going on some split stance stuff, whatever you guys like the best. Right. And that's where it comes to giving them what they want and giving them what they need, right? Just like I said, like, yeah, know your clients, right? You got to keep them happy. You want to keep them, you know, feeling good about themselves and coming back and keeping them strong. So it's like you give them what they want. If the guy or the gal wants to barbell squat, let them do it. You know what I mean? Supplement with, like we talked about, maybe a warm up where you're doing some goblet, more narrow type thing, right? Let them go ham there. And then at the end, hit them with some rear foot elevated. You don't have to like be like, all right, we're doing like a corrective. Like throw that bar on them that Mike's using over there. Do some rear foot elevated or just heavy load them with a couple kettlebells, right? No, but I think really what it comes down to ultimately is just that, right? Give them a little bit of what they need, right? A lot of people need hamstrings. We don't really work, I mean, you guys do actually a pretty good job, but like a lot of gyms don't really work that, you know what I mean? So you can get creative with that. A lot of people need hamstrings, a lot of people need groin. We don't need to do the band stuff all day long. If you want to throw it in every once in a while, I'm cool with that, right? Get them doing heavy stuff, 2-legged, get them going split stance, throwing some single leg every once in a while. Have them move in different planes. You guys do a great job of that. Better than anybody I've seen gym-wise anywhere. So good job with that, and that's why I like coming here, because it's like you give people a good experience, whether you guys know it or not. You get this doing all sorts of stuff, and you get this doing all sorts of stuff. It's really good for people. The people that get hurt are the people that come in every day. They do the same routine that their high school football coach gave them. You know what I mean? And then it's like, that's how people break down. You know, they're throwing the bar over, they're bunt winking, you know, on heavy squats. They don't even know it. They don't know, you know, what range they need to be operating in, and eventually, poof, there goes the back. But yeah, you guys are doing a great job. Just think about some of this stuff as in terms of like when you're doing, especially your private sessions of like, all right, like I know Jesse's talked to me a lot about this, but like you see people, right? Just notice where they like to be on their feet, right? What they're good at, what they suck at. Give them some stuff that they're good at, make it hard, challenge them, and do a lot of stuff that they suck at. Stuff they suck at is probably the stuff that they need, which you guys obviously already know, but anatomically, biomechanically, yeah. That's a good question. Obviously depends on the type of tissue. Meniscus is like what we would call an inert tissue, which means it doesn't contract. So there's not a whole lot you can do about it. You can focus on the stuff that does contract. The meniscus is gonna be pressured at like 90 the most, and a little bit below that too. So hammer strength before they get to 90. That's what I would say. Have them do a lot of like split stance stuff. Like if they're trying to get really strong, you know, you can do the shorter range stuff, double leg, or have them do some split stance stuff where they're in those deeper hip range of motion, but they're not maybe in as deep knee range of motion, right? Or they just don't have to go quite as deep. Single leg stuff is great for them because it's going to be really hard muscularly, but they're never going to get to 90 anyway. So, you know, that's a good thing that you can do. Step down type stuff, you know. For a meniscus, yeah, depends on where it is too, like medial, lateral, you know, but for the most part, like let pain be your guide. If they get pain at a certain point, it's probably gonna be around 90 and below, and as they're getting down and up through that, and if they hurt there, don't put them there, you know. Yeah,
If it hurts, don't do it.
yeah, most people don't give a shit, you know what I mean? Like they just wanna come in here and they not feel pain when they're here, not feel pain afterwards. If they get stronger, I mean, chances are they're going to feel better. You know what I mean? It's the lowest hanging fruit. Like we all believe that to our core. Like a lot of people, if you add strength to them, they're going to feel better. A lot of the little things are going to go away. You know, I can't tell you how many times I work with people with back pain, especially like older women, and their knees just like don't do anything. They just can't load them at all. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, you know, they haven't been using it. That's why the back hurts, right? Because they don't have any ability to disperse force below the back. And, you know, it's tough. But it's like all you got to do is give them a little bit of strength, right? In a non-painful way, in a range that they can control. I have a woman that I'm working with right now. She has a tough time going downstairs. I have her double yoga blocked from the top step. She's going down like less than an inch probably. That's as much as she can do pain-free. Just forward, and I'm just having her do that forward step down, literally 1 inch. And next week she'll be able to do 2 inches probably. You know what I mean? And but if I go 3 inches right now, oof, ouch, you know? So I'm just not messing with that, right? Just if you guys have people that have pain, obviously, you know, try to work around it basically, right? Try to give them what they need. Think about how you can strengthen that without putting as much force into the joint maybe, right? But yeah, I mean, if you just give most people a little bit of strength around it, like they'll feel better, you know? It's just about, for them, dispersing forces, you know? Hey, like, it's a diagnosis, I have it, right? But if you take a picture of most 50-year-old people, you know, they're gonna have some fraying on the rotator cuff, they're gonna have some wear down on the meniscus, on the cartilage, you know, around their knees and stuff like that. Like, it's just kind of how it goes. And right, like to your point, most people aren't going to be symptomatic with that. So that can be the danger of like going to get an MRI is like once you're like, oh, I have the diagnosis, like, ooh, now we should, you know, it's like, well, that might not even be why you're feeling pain, why you know, but whatever. But yes, a lot of people have meniscus tears and they can be minuscule. They can be big. Again, that's why you got to let pain be your guide on that one. You shouldn't necessarily like write somebody off from going to 90 if they they have that, you know, if they're coming to you like in pain and the meniscus has been a big issue, then, but hammer strength above that and, you know, in different ways and stuff. That's a great way to do it. I was just going to say, like, open chain stuff is really good for those people, meaning foot's not on the ground. So that stuff you can hammer like, you know, hamstrings with those, or with other things. You could have them do the feet up on the wall or feet here. That might be comfortable for them. It's like same thing as we did here with Jesse and James, but over there you would just have your feet on the wall. Same idea, but okay. Yeah, and that's, you know, that's tough, man. That's just dealing with people, and that's what we do. You know, people are scared to do stuff, and they had a bad experience once, and it's like, you know, so you have to meet them where they're at. Some days it's going to be a bad day, and you're like, okay, you know, not going to push you or whatever, and sometimes you need to know when to push them and say, hey, this is okay. Like, I'm right here. I'm going to, you know, whatever. But yeah, that's just part of being in the biz that we're in. And I think, you know, to that, if you can get them squatting a little bit, you know, if it's a range of, like, try to find out what it is. Is it a range of motion thing? She doesn't like going deep, you know? Is it, just keep the treadmill off and just have her push, kick away. Same thing, you could take a, sled. You can take one of those super bands and put it around the back of her knee too, and just have her standing here, and then just, you know, like a TKE, basically. You know, and just work minimal range of motion, minimal, you know, instability, any of that. Just kind of put it right above the back of the knee there, and then just let your knee come towards me, yep, and then just straighten her out. You don't even have to hold it. If you want, you put it around something like that, and then that way you can kind of like tactically cue her and all that, so. Yeah, exactly. But you can have her go like a little slow, and you can have her hold it at the end. She'll feel all that eccentrically, right, where this is gonna be more like kind of concentric of like, you're squeezing to the end range basically, whereas that's going to be more like focusing more on going slow, like yielding, you know, and using gravity. But yeah, you could use the sled on her because she might be someone who it's here, but if she has a task to do, or she's like, oh, I'm not even thinking about, you know, what's happening down here. I'm just like trying to hold this thing and push. That could be helpful. Yeah, trick them into like, because a lot of them, they can do it. They're just scared to, right? Exactly. We will get motion from somewhere. The body is an incredible compensator, right? If you tell somebody to do something, their body is going to find a way to do it the best they can. The question is, what's doing it, right? When they get down to that midpoint, and like most people sticking point at a squat, right? 90 degrees, getting to parallel, right? Are they getting internal rotation there, right? Are they getting compression here, pelvis and down, or are they getting compression right here? Right? Are they driving that spine forward and doing that? They're going to get it somehow. They're going to find a way to get up, right? The question is, where are they getting it from? And then that's when it's up to us to say, okay, do I want them doing, you know, 5x5 lumbar extensions with 135 pounds on the bar, right? Or maybe do I want to change this up a little bit? Maybe do I want to throw a wedge under their feet, right? Or whatever it is. See if I can get them to drop a little bit more vertically, and find, or maybe I want to do some of the hamstring stuff and the groin stuff, get that going so that they can get internal rotation here and not back in here, right? So it's where are you getting the motion from? Because the body's going to find it.